Sonic Colors Ultimate has had a rough launch to say the least, so I thought now would be a good time to take a look back at the series' experiences with remasters. 1998 would see the release of the first 3D main series Sonic game, that being Sonic Adventure for the Dreamcast. Due to the declining popularity of the Sega Dreamcast, it would cause Sega to pull out of the console production market. As a byproduct of this, not very many people were able to experience Sonic's first jump into 3D. As a way to remedy this, Sega would release a remaster of the game to the Nintendo GameCube in 2003. This port would be called Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut. This is the game I would like to talk about today. For the sake of clarity, I want it to be known that I recorded my footage in 1080. This is not how the game comes. Right now on screen, you can see a before and after of me using mods. I highly recommend using these mods if you ever want to play this game. I will leave a link in the description to how to do all that stuff. There are plenty of great mods. I recommend upscaling, and I also recommend the Dreamcast conversion mod. Getting right into it, I want to start off with one of the first things you see when starting up the game, even before you come up on the menu. You start off with this cutscene, almost kinda eerie in the way that it goes through the city with the music and sounds it's portraying, until eventually you see perfect chaos. Our big baddie for this adventure is Perfect Chaos, if that wasn't already clear. After this, it kicks into the vocal theme for the game, Open Your Heart, incredibly done by Crush 40. This is the first vocal theme in a Sonic game ever, and it's incredible for Sonic's first 3D outing. Then we cut around to our all main characters for the game, that being Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, Gamma, and Big. While this cutscene isn't all too much important to the game, it sets the stakes high and sets the energy high for what we're going into and what we should expect from Sonic Adventure. From there we go straight into the menus, which wants to absolutely blow your ears out with the instrumental cover of Open Your Heart. While it sounds absolutely incredible, I think they could have toned the volume down just a bit to save my eardrums. From there, we go into the character select screen, which isn't something all too new for Sonic games, but the difference is the amount of characters and the fact that they're not all unlocked straight from the beginning. Getting straight into the game, you can tell the difference between 2D Sonic and 3D Sonic, with the main focus being on story for this time around. Getting right into Sonic's story, it starts off with a couple cutscenes to show you what's happening and to introduce Chaos, our main antagonist for the game. While cutscenes aren't too new for the Sonic series, this time around they are used for story and they actually give you a reason to go forward. Previous Sonic titles would throw you right into the game with no reason to what you're doing, which you would find out along the way. But the difference in Sonic Adventure, they throw you straight into the story and they get it started off right. Speaking of cutscenes, I think now would be a good time to kind of talk about the look and feel of Sonic Adventure. The graphics may look outdated now, but back then they were still pretty good, even if they were still a bit janky. Though the models in this game, due to the lighting engine being changed for this port of the game, do look a bit plastic. While this doesn't hinder the game, it just makes models look kinda shiny when they shouldn't. Overall though, I think Sonic looks pretty good here, him and his friends in fact. While I won't go over all the changes from the Dreamcast to this version of the game because we'd be here all day, one major difference is all the models have been upgraded. They all have individual fingers instead of just being kinda one ball. I think the voice actor for Sonic in this game does a very good job, but I think the voice direction can use some work sometimes. It can be very jarring in some scenes. I think the rest of the cast does a pretty good job as well, except for maybe Tails. He sounds kind of like a kid and not quite like he knows what he's talking about. It sounds like he's reading from a script whenever you can hear him talk.
What's that? The Chaos Emerald!
Get away from there!
Ah!
Nighty night!
Eggman! That's Eggman! I wonder what happened to Sonic.
Going from cutscene to the game isn't too jarring, except for when you have the occasional CGI cutscene that's pre-rendered. It makes for a smooth transition between gameplay and actual cutscenes. There are a lot of cutscenes that interrupt the gameplay during the hub world, so I think this is a very good thing they did. The game looks great, and there's so many upgrades from the Dreamcast to the GameCube version, and downgrades as well, but mostly a net positive. The color palette in this game is extremely varied, which makes for a visually appeasing game. It helps to distinguish the stage, because they all have their own kind of colors that go with them. You can tell Emerald Coast from its bright blues and its white sand. It's also bright and cheerful. And then you get into the second part of the level where it's all green and lush, but you still got those bright blues with the water. That's only one example. I could go all day about the color choice in every level. It is incredible. It makes them distinguishable from one another and memorable. Speaking of distinguishable, the soundtrack for this game is absolutely incredible. Some of the best music in the Sonic series. For a first time in this game, every character has a vocal theme to go along with them. Though those themes can get kind of tiresome, how they're played ad nauseum in each character's campaign, and whenever they come on screen. Thankfully, that's not the only music in this game. There are so many tracks and so many different styles of music in this game, even in the vocal themes alone. I think that about does it for all I want to cover with how the game looks and sounds. Overall, I think it's pretty decent, even if it is a bit dated. Now let's get into some actual gameplay. I do want to take this story by story because every story has a different style of gameplay for every character, with the only two being extremely similar, that of Sonic and Tails. I am going to be going through the stories in order, so the first on the list is Sonic's story. Starting off Sonic's story, we start off with an animated cutscene. Not CGI like the intro, but we are introduced to Chaos here, and as soon as the cutscene's over, we're thrown into a boss battle with him, even without knowing who he is or what he wants. This is a very interesting start for Sonic's story, as we've never had a Sonic game that starts off on a boss fight, and to top it off, it's a brand new character for the series. It's a very easy boss fight, which most of the bosses in Sonic Adventure are like that, but it's very quick, and it introduces you to the mechanics very quickly. I think this would be a good time to go over Sonic's movement and moveset in 3D because they are different in this game. The first thing I want to start off with is yes, Sonic can walk and run in this game. I know, it's amazing, but it's important to state because up until this point, that wasn't guaranteed in the Sonic game. Though we do have the returning spin dash in this game, though it is a bit different than its past incarnations. Like now you do not have to stop moving to use it, and it's mapped to just one button instead of being like the old games where you had to hold down and press a button repeatedly. This can make for very fast gameplay when you learn how to use it, and very cool momentum based jumps and shortcuts that you would never have been able to do before. I believe this is an overall improvement to the spin dash for 3D, while also keeping true to Sonic's 2D origins. And a brand new move for the 3D games, or not so brand new depending on how you look at least brand new to Sonic's base moveset, the homing attack. This move was originally introduced in Sonic 3D Blast as a power-up to help hitting enemies in a 3D space, because that game used an isometric 3D, so it was kind of hard to judge where enemies were in relation to you. It is reintroduced in this game as part of Sonic's base moveset to help negate that problem of hitting enemies in 3D by just jumping on them. It helps to target enemies. I think this is a great addition. It does feel satisfying to hit the homing attack, and it's quite fun when you're first starting the game. As you can guess, this also adds to the variability of stage design in this game, and even more shortcuts in addition to the ones with the spin dash. The rest of Sonic's moveset comes in the form of power-ups found within the hub world. These power-ups being the Lightspeed Dash and the Lightspeed Attack. These aren't the names of the actual items themselves, but the names of the moves since we're talking about the moveset. The Lightspeed Dash is an ability that lets you race down a trail of rings very quickly. Though to do this you have to use the Spin Dash to charge it up, and it takes quite a while. And while you can get a power up to shorten that time, it's still not worth it in the long run. And because of this issue, it ends up finding very little use in this game. There are a few sections where this is required to use, but it's still pretty annoying even in those sections. Then the Lightspeed Attack is also based on that same charge up time, so you can only do one or the other. But the Lightspeed Attack lets you zoom around an enemy and destroy them instantly, except for bosses, of course. This is another ability that finds very little use in this game, as it takes too long to charge up, and most enemies already go down in one hit. The coolest thing I can give to this is when you're doing the Chaos 6 boss fight, where you have to freeze him and attack him. If you use a Lightspeed Attack, you do deal double damage, and that's probably the most useful thing it does. Beyond that, it's completely useless except for getting into Red Mountain, which it's required for. It's a power-up that should have been optional, because it is cool to see Sonic race around the enemies and destroy them, and it was cooler to me as a kid than it is now. Now I just tend to get annoyed trying to use it, because he races around them and doesn't hit them for a while. Now with all of that in place, let's talk about the overall gameplay for Sonic's story. Sonic's story gameplay is pretty basic for the most part. It's just like the classic games. Race to the end of the stage, free the flickies, and fight bosses. The end game of Sonic's story is just to beat Eggman. Yep, that's right, we're calling him Eggman in this game, even though before this he was known as Dr. Robotnik. They even poke fun at this within the English dub, as they call him Dr. Eggman, and he takes on the name in spite. From there we go into a scene with Sonic seeing Tails crash, and unfortunately, no, he doesn't die from this, so we do have to play as him. I know, hold your booze, but it's not that bad, because we also have to play big in this game, and that's wonderful. Moving forward, we go into our first stage of Emerald Coast, which is a great opening level that isn't Green Hill Zone. This stage is great for showing you many different things about Sonic's moveset and how he moves in 3D, and how his momentum works in this game. There are so many different things happening throughout the stage. There are plenty of spring pads, plenty of enemies to homing attack, and plenty of places to get going fast with the spin dash, and very cool set pieces like loops and killer whales. That's right, that's where this infamous scene is from. It's incredible, and they're all throughout the game. And that's what Sonic's gameplay boils down to in this game. Fun environments to run through with really cool set pieces that are nice and memorable. I don't think there's much reason to go into every stage piece by piece, because we would be here all day. Sonic's story is the longest in this game, though most of them have their own unique thing they're going for, and some fun reason to play them. Except maybe Lost World, it knows what it did. Any kid who played this game was scarred by that stage. Though I will name some of the more notable stages here, ones that I particularly like and are at the top of my list of to play. These are based on my opinions, so these aren't fact. I'm sure a lot of people would disagree, but this is what I find fun about the game. My favorite stages in Sonic's story are Emerald Coast, Windy Valley, Final Egg, and Ice Cap. They're not in any particular order, but these are just some of my favorite ones to play because of their set pieces, their environments, and their obstacles. I mean, heck, in what other Sonic game do you get to outrun an avalanche with a snowboard? It's incredible. It's that scene from Sonic 3, except fully realized. Now from here, I need to go into something a bit more depressing about this game, the boss fights. In the classic Sonic games, the bosses are mind-numbingly easy, but that also makes them able to be done extremely quickly in those games. Well, in Sonic Adventure, we lost one of those things, and it makes them kind of hard to deal with. And if you guessed the ability to do them quickly, ding ding ding, you're right. And that makes them terribly slow most of the time. There are a few exceptions to this rule, but those bosses are mind-numbingly easy and not that fun anyways. Though there are a couple bosses that have pretty cool designs, but are ruined by the fact of how long they take, because they become just a waiting game. And you're bored out of your mind the entire time because they're predictable. The boss fight that comes to mind when everyone thinks of this game and terrible boss fights? Chaos 4. And what great idea did they have for this? Let's make the player fight it 3 times. That's correct. Not only do you fight it in Sonic's story, but you have to find it in Tails and Knuckles' story as well. And this won't be the only boss to do this. This is just the most outrageous because of how long the boss fight is and how many times you have to fight it without it changing in the slightest. If the speed of the attacks were picked up, I don't think this would be as outrageous as it is. But unfortunately, that's not the case here, and that's not what we're looking at. So, I'm going to have to stamp this boss fight as terrible. Though this boss fight does help to illustrate the cool idea that is Chaos as a boss. As you go through the game, you will fight Chaos multiple times, but each time he has a brand new form. And that's thanks to the fact that Eggman is feeding him Chaos Emeralds. And you may ask why he's doing this. It's to bring Chaos back to his perfect form and full power. Because he knows somehow that would let Eggman rule the world and not Chaos. You know, makes sense. And this is the entire plot of Sonic's story, so I'm not really going to go too in depth on it. There are a couple of flashbacks to try and flesh out who Chaos is, but I think I'll go over those at the end after all the stories because it makes more sense that way. Because as is in each campaign, you get bits and pieces of this backstory, and it's not a very well fleshed out backstory to begin with, so it doesn't make much sense, and it doesn't have much impact on what's happening in the here and now. It's kind of used more as an excuse to get Sonic from place to place, other characters as well, or just add time to the game. While this doesn't ruin the game in itself and it's not necessarily bad, it is kind of jarring and it feels a bit out of place, so that's the only reason I bring it up. This could have been a very cool thing for the origin story of Chaos. I still think it is to some degree, and it is also the explanation for the Child Garden in the game, which I'll get into later as well, because it's something tied to the hub world as a whole, and it's basically a whole nother game. But getting back to Sonic's playthrough, there are many gimmicks throughout his stages, whether it be riding roller coasters and go-karts, or riding snakes, lighting up dark rooms so you see where you're platforming and where you need to go. It adds a bit of variety to his campaign overall. Though there are 2 gimmick stages in the game, being Sky Chase 1 and Sky Chase 2, that are absolutely terrible and boring. You can get through them without putting literally any input on the screen. I could show you, but that would be time consuming. It would be a bore for both you and I. I will show you a little bit of gameplay from it, but it's not much to show. And they're not short stages, so I have plenty to show. And you also have to play them in both Sonic's and Tails' story. And it takes up a large majority of Tails' stories, as his story is already short. And that helps me segue into the rest of the campaigns and kind of how their gameplay differs from Sonic's. And while there's much less variety in the rest of the campaigns, they're still not terrible because they're much shorter than Sonic's. The only issue being that you have to play all 6 to get the final story and the actual ending to the game. I feel like it makes it much harder to replay this game 100%, knowing that if you play Sonic's story first, the rest of the game is kind of downhill from there. Even if it's not terrible, you'll never reach the same heights that are in Sonic's story in any of the other stories. The only other characters that really come close are Knuckles and Gamma, and that's because their gameplay is so different from the normal. But those two are for a later time. Right now, I want to move into Tails' story since we're going to go in order here. One thing I would like to point out here is that these sections on these next couple stories will be much shorter than I went on Sonic's, because there's much less content and the base movement system is the same, but their moveset is just slightly different. Even most of the power-ups from this point on don't give the character a new move. They're just augmentations to their abilities that already exist, whether speeding them up or making them easier to do or better in some way, but it will never add a new move, so there's not much variety coming from it. It feels like a wasted opportunity because any of these stages could happen at any time without the power-ups, so there's not much point in them being there. And it's not like the power-ups make the older stages any easier or unlock any new shortcuts for you. The exception to this rule is Knuckles and Gamma again, but their stories are just a bit better because of their gameplay and how different they are. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's get right into Tails. And yes, in Tails' story, we begin right where Sonic found him, right there in Emerald Coast. We get those cutscenes, but then Tails' first stage is Windy Valley. And I know you may be thinking, didn't we play that stage as Sonic? Yes, we did. Since Tails is with Sonic for most of his story, most of the stages are repeat stages from Sonic's story, only cut down and made into a race against Sonic. This essentially makes all of Tails' stages just dumbed down version of Sonic stages, but with a time limit. And the races aren't even that hard. The AI is pretty much brain dead, and since all these stages were designed for Sonic and not Tails, as soon as you add in his flying mechanic, they're broken, wide open, which makes the races even easier than they already were. Though I will give the AI credit, it proves that Sonic is the fastest thing to go live. All you have to do is look at the rubber banding at the bottom of the screen. He basically teleports. So Tails has a pretty basic moveset compared to Sonic. He can fly instead of homing attack, and he has a tail attack instead of the spin dash. And that's it. He doesn't get anything more, but he also doesn't really need it. His story is only a couple stages long anyways. It's mostly just cutscenes compared to anything else, kinda like all of the other stories beyond Sonic, which is fine I guess, but they're probably gonna get skipped by most players. The only stage that really ends up working in Tails' story is Speed Highway, and that's because you get to take a completely different path from what Sonic did, flying from roof to roof, and racing against Eggman, because he has blasted a missile off for some reason in Station Square, but it didn't go off, and for some reason, he thinks he should go blow it up himself. Good note to keep in mind, Eggman, maybe don't shoot off explosives in the city you're in. But this really does help to tie into Tails' character arc in this story. While Sonic didn't really have a character arc for the most part, he didn't need one. But Tails is always following Sonic and relying on him. So in this story, it's all about Tails becoming his own person and relying on Sonic less and less. And you can even see it in the cutscenes. In the beginning, Tails is more scared in his versions of every cutscene compared to Sonic's story. And also, he's the main character for some reason. But that's just artistic liberty. One thing to note about all the campaigns is that they do share cutscenes where they intersect with Sonic's story or another character's story, and they're all slightly different, as if you're really truly seeing it from their perspective and not what actually happened. I kind of like this, but I also hate it because it's implied that Sonic's version is always right. It is nice to see Tails step out of Sonic's shadow in this game, but it will never happen again, and we have to reset the status quo at the end of every game pretty much, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. This is especially seen in the modern games. Just look at Sonic Forces, and that's a game for a whole nother day as well. let's not get into modern Tales today. Let's just focus on this game and how great it is in this game. There's not much else to say about Tales' story and gameplay as a whole here, because it's mostly repeated content from Sonic's story until you get towards the end where they're a little bit more separated. But it still is a nice way to wrap up Tails' story and give him an actual character rather than just being the sidekick. Now to round off the trio, let's move on to Knuckles, who has a brand new gameplay style in this game. Rather than just get to the end of the stage, there's a real objective and you're actually expected to explore the stage, at least to some extent. Knuckles' story starts with him resting peacefully on the Angel Island, right where he left him at the end of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But now, the Master Emerald is shattered, awakening him and releasing chaos into the world. While this does seem a bit weird that this is where it came from and we never knew it, with how much the Master Emerald was a plot point before, it doesn't really matter, because it's just an excuse to get Knuckles in the game, and we love that guy, so it's perfect. Though in all seriousness, Knuckles' story does revolve around Chaos shattering the Emerald to be freed. Though, this also shapes his gameplay because it's treasure hunting. Knuckles' gameplay is going through the stages that we went through before, though they're a bit different. Maybe some of them are a bit bigger now, and there's a lot more areas you can get to using Knuckles' abilities. And the point of all these stages is to find 3 pieces of the Master Emerald scattered around the stages. And they're different every time, so each time you play this game, there's going to be a unique factor to it. You're aided in this task by the tracks at the bottom of the screen that will start glowing once you get close, going from blue to green to yellow to red, in order of how close you are to them. In this game, you can track multiple pieces of the Master Emerald at the same time. This makes them very quick sometimes, especially if the emerald pieces are right next to each other. And if you're having trouble with the game, well, you can use these hint orbs that are flying around. They're also in the hub world that help you move throughout the hub world. But for Knuckles stages, they will help you find the Master Emerald pieces. They're a little bit too handholdy because they take you straight to where the emerald is. So it's less of a hint and more of a guide. I'm sure younger me enjoyed this a lot more than I do now. Probably because now I feel like the game's just calling me stupid, saying I can't find them on my own. And you may think it'd be really easy to find all these emerald pieces in plain sight, but with Knuckles' moveset, it's made incredibly harder. Just like the classic games, Knuckles can glide and jump, though now fully 3D, so there's much more places you can go, and a lot more areas to explore. In this game, Knuckles also has a punching combo you could use to defeat enemies. It's not all too useful, I don't think, but it's still there and kind of cool because Knuckles is supposed to be a tough guy. Another new addition that you get once you get the digging claws is the ability to burrow into the ground and walls. This makes so many more places for emeralds to be hidden, and can make them much harder to find, of course. Though if you go and use the fairy hint, you're not going to have any trouble at all, and that's kind of sad. And the size of the levels are never quite too big in this game. I think the worst offender in this game is probably Lost World, because it's kind of big and there's a lot of smaller areas that it splits off into. But beyond that, all the stages are pretty fine, and there's not too many of them, so they don't overstay their welcome. It's a slower paced gameplay compared to Sonic and Tails, but it's also completely new and refreshing, unlike Tails just being a repeat of Sonic, but even easier. So I at least have to get Sega an A for effort for originality in this case, because in a normal Sonic game or even a modern Sonic game, you would never see this again. Now for Knuckles bosses, there are a couple unique ones, but most of them are still repeated. Knuckles is the only character that gets to fight Chaos too, and it's a pretty terrible fight, to be fair, so I don't know why they gave it to him. We could have skipped that. and it kind of makes Knuckles look really stupid because he's again tricked by Eggman. You know, the same thing that happened in the last main game. In fact, Knuckles isn't the only character who looks flat out stupid in this game. There are many cutscenes within Sonic's and Tails' story due to the animation quality that make them look really stupid, where Sonic and Tails could have both picked up the Chaos Emerald before they were stolen by Eggman, or they just fumble it with Butterfingers. And just like Sonic in this game, Knuckles doesn't really have a character arc, but he is more connected to the story with Chaos because the origin story has to do with the echidnas and stuff, and like I said, we'll get to all that later because it's kind of a broken, fragmented thing put across all the stories trying to convince you to play them all. And then, of course, at the end of Knuckles' stories, he finds all of the pieces of the Master Emerald, and the island goes back up to the sky where it belongs, which I don't really know why it needs to be there, because it falling to the planet and causing the tsunami didn't really seem to be an issue. So I don't understand why we made it start floating again. But we did, and Knuckles went back to sleep, happily ever after. And now, after Knuckles, is where we start to leave our main trio from the classic series. The next character, she's been in the classic series just once though, but only as a problem for Sonic. Problem may be too harsh of a word, but she did play the damsel in distress in Sonic's CD for Metal Sonic. Yes, that's right, we're talking about Amy. Now, Amy's story revolves around her finding a bird that falls from Eggman's ship that is carrying a Chaos Emerald, and along this, Eggman sends a robot to retrieve this Chaos Emerald from the bird's necklace. This, of course, completely bleeds into her gameplay, so in every level you play, you're actually playing to escape this robot. It's kinda like a kid's first horror game. It's basically mini Nemesis from Resident Evil if you ever played those games. The reason I compare it to Nemesis is because it slowly follows you. As long as you keep moving, it'll never catch you, and you can deal damage to keep it in place for a little bit so that you can do what you need to do. But also, like Resident Evil, there's many levers and different actions you have to do to continue forward in her stages. There are puzzles in quotation marks, but they're mostly just matching colors and putting blocks with the correct color. Though there are a cool couple scenes where Zero busts their wall. That's right, the robot's name is Zero. I don't really know why, I don't know where it came from, but it is. You get to see all the scenes of Sonic coming to save Amy from her perspective, but it's more like she's just playing tag with a robot, because even when the robot grabs her, it never even hurts her, so I don't really understand what she's running from. Eventually she is caught and put onto Eggman's ship in a cell, but later freed by Gamma. And I'll go over that a little bit more in his story because it has to do with his character arc. I know, a robot having character arc doesn't really make sense, but like I said, we'll talk about that then. Amy is actually the only reason Gamma gets to survive in this game, because Sonic was going to destroy him, just like all of the Eggman's other robots. Which is a fair action to take, as they do kind of run on animals still. But I'm happy to say that Amy only has one boss fight in her story, and it's at the very end with Zero. And it's actually kind of nice. It's not the fastest, but it's not the slowest, but it's a lot more interesting, and some of the moves are pretty cool. And when I say cool, I just mean cool visually, because they're still pretty easy to dodge and pretty readable. But the way you hurt him is by hitting him into the electric fence, and then the button on top of his head opens up and you can hit it. And I guess I should kind of talk about her movement. Her movement's pretty bad, even though she looks pretty cool when doing them. So Amy, the only piece of anything she has is a hammer. And she can spin with it, hit things with it, and also do a really cool spinning, flipping jump when you get running at full speed. Though, that brings me to her full speed, which is non-existent because she's extremely slow. Especially if you get moving up any hill, she might as well not be moving. This is definitely the worst part about her playthrough. Her playthrough is only 3 stages long, so it doesn't last long, and there's more cutscenes than there are stage, so I don't know why they even bothered including her. I guess for variety's sake, almost as a tech demo for what the Dreamcast could do. But beyond that, she's kind of pointless. She doesn't really add to the story, though I guess you get the bird story, which is, oh man, he's free now, I guess, but I didn't really feel much for it now or when I was a kid. But who knows, maybe I'm just a sociopath who has no feelings. Though, she still is not the worst character in the game. Don't worry, my eternal punishment is coming. Let's talk about the friend that Amy made on Eggman to ship the egg carrier, Gamma. I know it's kind of odd. This is the first time you get to play as someone from Eggman's side of the story. While you would think this makes his story kinda meaningless because we shouldn't like him, it's actually quite sad, and I wish he got to stay around more. Right from the start of Gamma's story, we get to see Eggman from one of his minions' perspective, how they're bossed around, commanded like they're nothing to him. And it's honestly quite sad. Even if he is a robot at the time and we think he doesn't have any feelings or anything like that. I mean, as soon as you get through the training ground you're put through, he forces you to fight what would essentially be your older brother. If this was anything beyond robots, this would be terrible and people would ask what's wrong with you. And even once you beat your brother, Eggman just sends him off to be destroyed, not repaired or upgraded in any way. He just says you're useless now, and that's terrible. And then even further beyond this, Gamma learns he was a series of robots made to try and retrieve a piece of chaos that Big's frog swallowed. And once he finds the frog, the rest of the robots are sent away. Like they're nothing, and it's made seem like Gamma's the only one of any use, and even then, he's made to seem like he's useless in Eggman's eyes because he can't do anything beyond help him find Froggy. Like, I mean, look, he immediately throws him to fight Sonic, knowing that he's likely gonna get destroyed, and doesn't even try to help him once he sees him down. He just runs away. But even being defeated by Sonic, Amy comes in to save him and stops Sonic from destroying him. Even with the egg carrier going down, he finds a way to survive, so we can keep going along with his story. You would think that would be it for him since he's a robot. What else could he do? There's no other objective for him. Eggman's not giving him any commands. Well, as it turns out, his conversation with Amy in the jail cell somehow sparked some kind of emotion in him. Eggman seems really good at making robots with intelligence that want to go against him. Like Metal Sonic. But from here on out in Gamma's campaign, you go through to find the rest of the E-Series robots and destroy them. Because as it turns out, Eggman did send them off for repairs and upgrades, but didn't use them apparently. Yes, these stages are still set in all the same areas, but now they're a lot different because with Gamma, you're actually set on a timer from the start. And you may think that's like Tails gameplay, but it's a lot different in this case, because in this case, your timer is consistently going down unless you get chain combos with your weapon, and then you get more time added to your timer. And you may be saying, weapon? Gun? In my Sonic game? Shadow, is that you? No, trust me, we're not quite there yet. We'll get there. You have a laser targeting system for your weapon in this game as Gamma, and the more you target in one laser press, the more time you'll get added back to your timer. There's not a whole lot done with the mechanic in this game, but it definitely could have been a lot more interesting and more nerve-wracking and more skill needed to beat these stages. But I understand why they did this, because kids did still need to beat this, and I'm sure some of them had trouble with how it is now. The Gamma does have some really cool moves, like when he floats over water, he gets a propeller in his waist, and he turns into a little mini car when he starts to go at full speed, which is just incredible and satisfying to do. I remember as a kid running around like this for hours just because I liked the animation. There are 2 upgrades you can get for Gamma. It's part of his playthrough. One optional, the other not. The optional one is just an upgrade to your gun. It's not really all that useful in this game. I don't even think it really helps you fight the E-Series bosses. Now, the required one is the thruster pack, which is pretty fun to use. It's basically just a hover pack for Gamma. This of course lets you get over large gaps and things like that, but it also lets you target more easily in the air because you can control your descent and destroy enemies that are under you. While this power-up doesn't see too much use, I still think it's pretty cool, because both these things are of course found on the egg carrier where Gamma was made, and I think that's pretty neat detail. So once the egg carriers crashed and we're done with all that, and we're finding the E-Series robots, at the end of each stage you will have to fight a boss, which they're not too hard because they become a spam fest to lock on with the missiles. And it's kind of annoying more than anything, but non-offensive because they're extremely quick. And after you've freed all of the flickies from the E-Series robots, you have to fight your brother once again, but he is upgraded to the max, and I actually really like this boss fight. It's actually kind of challenging to some degree, and he has some pretty incredible moves. It really is a test of everything Gamma's done up until this point to prove that he's the ultimate and that he's the savior of all the E-Series robots. But once Gamma has defeated his older brother, coming right back to where we started, it turns out he's not quite dead, and Gamma gets shot in the back. And this is a very sad moment, because you get to see a bunch of Gamma's memories, and it's a really sad moment because you watch him slowly power down and explode. But in this instance, you can see one of the flickies that's related to the one Amy has fly out and reunite with him. This is pretty satisfying overall because, to be honest, going into his story, you don't really expect anything from him as a character because he's just a mute robot. But there he is having a sad moment, and it's honestly better than both Amy's story and Big's story even combined. And that means I have to move on to Big. Easily the worst story in the game, both story-wise and gameplay-wise. We start off Big's story with him sleeping peacefully in his jungle home until Froggy, his best friend, sees something mysterious, and his first instinct is to eat it. This would turn out to be a piece of chaos, supposedly his tail, but I've seen a tail on him before he gets it, so I don't really believe that, but I can believe it's a part of him, so that's fine. And this makes Froggy start acting weird, and he runs away from Big. And that's what Big's gameplay is all about, is catching Froggy. And you might think that's fine, get to the end of the stage and find Froggy. Perfect. But no. Instead, in my Sonic game, we get to have fishing mechanics for every single level of this character. Let me remind you, you have to play this story to be able to get the final story. For Big's gameplay, you have to find where Froggy is and which pool of water he's in, because certain levels will have more than one, which is kind of annoying. But even then, there's other fish to contend with, and if you accidentally hook them, you can't just let them go or break the line. You have to try and reel them in or purposely break the line, which even purposely breaking the line can be kind of hard with some of these fish. And even if you do manage to get Frog in the line, sometimes when he bites the hook, he doesn't get hooked, so you can't reel him in. And then you're just left there with this sad, pathetic lure and these terrible controls for fishing. The game makes it seem like you need to tilt the rod using the joystick in whatever direction to go against the fish or with the fish. I'm not really sure because I don't think it ever works. I do it anyways, just to feel like I have some control in the situation. I will give it credit, once you do get Froggy, it's pretty harmless, but it can just be annoying sometimes, especially when a random fish decides to swim up and get your hook right when Froggy's about to. It is the absolute worst, and I hate it. But that's about it for Big's gameplay. There are power-ups for Big, but they come in the form of lures, which only allow him to catch bigger fish, which honestly, I think would make the main game harder because more fish spawn. Though they are optional, but the only reason you would want to get them is if you're going for all A ranks in the game, which is the whole separate option in the menu. For Big's A ranks, the way this game works, there are separate missions, and each one you have to catch a big fish basically. And the fish has to weigh so much, and then you catch Froggy, and you get the rank. Big does have a single boss, which I actually think is kind of interesting, and it's not a boss you actually fight. During the Chaos 6 fight, Froggy is actually inside of Chaos, and Sonic asks if he can help, and Big just decides, no, I'll do it myself, and fishes for Froggy inside of Chaos 6, which is incredible. He said, God of Destruction, more like my personal kiddie pool. And you may be asking, wait, doesn't that mean Big was on the egg carrier when it crashes? Yes, that's why he steals Tails' plane. That's right, our big bumbling idiot gets to steal the plane with a Chaos Emerald in it and crash it. And now reunited with his buddy, and his buddy being normal now, Big stories end. And that's all the lead up to the final story of the game. Our final story just basically boils down to Chaos beating up Knuckles and Eggman and getting the final Chaos Emeralds, and a final flashback for Sonic to complete that complete origin story of Chaos. Now that we're finally at that point, I think I should probably explain that whole thing of flashbacks and what's happening, because they seem kind of random otherwise. So these little hint bubbles, or fairies, or whatever you want to call them throughout the game, are actually a character named Decall, and you see flashbacks of her throughout the story. Decall is actually a character who knew Chaos back before he was evil and crazy, you know? When he was still happy, cheerful, and playing with the child and just protecting them. Decall is an echidna, just like Knuckles, before they were all gone, so she still has an entire family and a whole clan. And we see her repeatedly at the altar of the Master Emerald before it's in the state it is now, where it's fully complete, which is pretty cool to see, and you see all the 7 Chaos around it on pillars. It's a very nice scene, actually. And this is where she meets Chaos and becomes friends with him. Though over time, her clan would decide they need the power of the Master Emerald for some reason or another, and decide to storm it. Even with the call telling them no and they shouldn't do it, they trample her anyways, incurring Chaos's wrath. This is where Chaos goes perfect Chaos for the first time and kinda annihilates them for the most part. And in order to stop all this destruction that Chaos is causing, Decall seals him in the Master Emerald, along with herself. This is why he gets out of the Master Emerald by it shattering in the beginning of the game. At this point, after all of this has happened and Chaos has gotten all the Chaos Emeralds and transformed, the city is completely flooded and annihilated, and just looks like there's no hope. Decall meets Sonic here in her actual echidna form and tells him that they need to steal Chaos and the Master Emerald once again. Sonic declines this, saying it won't make his anger go away, so why seal him? Because in his eyes, it'll just happen again someday. His anger will just fester. Before Sonic has a way to even think of defeating Chaos, all of his friends walk up with the scattered Chaos Emeralds that Chaos used. Though when we see these Chaos Emeralds, they're completely black, missing all their normal color and shine. This is apparently because Chaos used all of the negative energy from it and none of the positive. And this is when Sonic uses the positive energy of the Chaos Emeralds, like friendship. to be able to go supersonic for the first time in 3D. And it's absolutely incredible, especially with the game's theme, Open Your Heart, playing the entire time. And this is when all your friends cheer you on to go defeat Perfect Chaos. So yes, this final story basically boils down to one big boss fight, but it's incredible. So for this boss fight, you're racing across the flooded streets as Supersonic, and you're actually boosting, kind of like the modern games to some degree. But to be able to keep this power, you have to keep collecting rings, just like the classic game. They're completely draining the entire time you're using Supersonic. And the way you defeat him is racing all the way up these streets, and then racing through Perfect Chaos and hitting his brain thing. And I actually really love this. It looks absolutely incredible, and I loved it when I was younger even more, because it was so cool to see Supersonic in 3D for the first time, and see him destroy a god of destruction, basically. Not really a god of destruction, it's god of chaos, but might as well be. But once you finally get that done and get through all of it, you see Chaos go back to his Chaos Zero state and with the call, and he gets to see his Chow, who has survived, and the Echidna clan did not slaughter them, surprisingly enough, in a kid's game. And then they go off, and happily ever after. And then everyone looks for Sonic, but he's already gone, running off to his next adventure, whatever that may be. And that's our nice ending for Sonic Adventure, even if the city is still in ruins. Overall, I think this is a great game, even if it does have some low points, but I suggest at least playing Sonic's campaign if you get the chance, and then maybe downloading a save file so you can play the final story. But if you find Sonic's campaign extremely fun, I would ask you to continue on, because it is still quite enjoyable, at least for Tails and Knuckles gameplay. The rest I kind of view as optional side stories, even though they're required for the last story, but with modern technology, of course, you can just download a save file and play the final story, so I would maybe suggest doing that. I have a major amount of nostalgia for this game, and it was very hard not just to say it was absolutely incredible across the board, because that's how I remembered it as a kid. But going back to it now, I can see the low points and the different problems it does have. But if you're looking just for a fun game to play that you don't have to pay super intense amount of attention to, it's a great play. And if you'd like to see another video about the extra content in the game, which there is quite a bit of, but this video's gone on long enough, so I'm just gonna skip them here. But let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. And with that, I'm wrapping up this video. So if you made it this far, thank you. I know it's a long video, but it's also a big game with a lot of different gameplay styles, so it's kind of hard to just mash it all up into one thing. This was kind of a rambling type of video for me. Honestly, I made up most of this on the spot. So let me know what you think in the comments. Tell me if I'm stupid or if you agree with me. And tell me how I can improve, because I want to. And remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And then maybe go follow me on Twitch if you like me. I like to stream games there. I like to have fun and chat with my viewers. And with all of that, until next time, have a lovely day.